Hello and welcome to CX Today. My name is Charlie. I am the senior editor here, and I'm thrilled today to bring you a rundown of 5 disruptive AI use cases in customer experience. And joining me for that conversation are 2 expert guests in everything contact center and customer experience. Yes, today I'm delighted to be joined by Chris Crosby, the founder and CEO of Ventures CX, and Chandler Galt, the senior product marketing manager of the Zoom contact center. Thanks both very much for joining me, and let's get right on into the discussion, starting with our first use case, and that is customer intent modeling. Maybe Chandler, I don't know if you could start on kind of sort of how this works and the value that it offers to contact centers.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Charlie, and thanks, Chris, for joining. I was at a customer experience conference last week, and one of the consistent themes throughout the whole 2-day session was predicting customer issues before they even have to call in or chat in, right? And I think that's a fascinating area that really wasn't possible before AI, right? To try to build a enough knowledge around that, you had to listen to call recordings all day or sift through massive amounts of data. Well, AI can do that now. And I was talking with a large telco that we're all familiar with, and they've taken all that data that they've got. They have a lot of data on all of us, right? And they're able now to really be surgical in terms of identifying issues before we even have them, right? Internet goes out, we may not even know, right? Maybe we're at work, maybe we're out for a run, and they're now deciding who deserves a proactive outreach, who needs a proactive outreach. There are some customers that might need a higher touch. They call in frequently whenever they have an issue. That's a certain demographic. But there's another demographic that may not even need to know that internet's out and that it got resolved while they were at work or while they're out for a run. And during COVID, they had this massive project to figure out who needs an actual technician to go into a house, right? They had to be really careful about who actually needed a technician to enter a house, right, during COVID. And what they found is that the younger generations, a certain demographic, if they just waited an hour, once an issue was identified, that demographic would fix it on their own. And they've now carried that through post-pandemic to say, look, not everybody needs a high-touch customer experience. In some cases, maybe a virtual agent makes more sense for a demographic that wants to self-serve first and would prefer to look at a knowledge base and triage things on their own, versus another demographic that does want that higher touch, maybe wants a proactive message or a call out to say, hey, we noticed your service is down, we're working on it, and we'll keep you updated. So AI is really, it's a super exciting time to hear all of these businesses that we all interact with every day, building these predictive models to help ensure that they're delivering better customer experiences.
Excellent. I don't know, Chris, if there's anything that you would add to that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe what I'd say is maybe if we step back and just sort of maybe evaluate or look at like what is customer intent modeling and sort of what's it do for us from an operational standpoint. I mean, I think when we look at the age-old question in call centers, it starts with, why are people calling me? And when are they going to call? And then who's the best resource to answer that call based off the reason they're calling and when they're calling? And then, to kind of dovetail into where Chandler's comments, it's like, well, what can we do to prevent that or to create a better experience around that, whether it's proactive engagement or fixing the actual underlying problem? And so customer intent modeling is really a byproduct of that now in the world of AI. And if you rewind even 5 years ago, the way you answered those questions was you spent a couple $1,000,000 to deploy speech analytics that did little more than keyword spotting. And you end up with word clouds that said hello in the middle, or thank you for calling, because they were very smart. Or you were sending your supervisor around asking agents, why are people calling? We got a call spike. Or you got your QA team listening to calls. Well, today we can determine in real time what is the underlying call driver. And with that information, then you can start to discern and do some diagnostics around, well, this person's calling because a certain product is on back order and they're calling for order status. Well, you can do a lot with that information. You can go fix the fulfillment issue and prevent the call from happening originally. You can adjust your call volume forecasts now. If you can get at that intent or that call driver that's like, okay, 30% of this call spike is around order status. How does that impact our staffing and our forecasting? And then 3, you can be more proactive around those interactions, or it's like, well, if we know that there's an issue around delivering these new t-shirts that we just released, and because demand is off the charts, let's proactively engage with those impacted customers and see if we can facilitate a better experience that either eliminates the call or eliminate and ultimately eliminates that frustration with them needing to pick up the phone as well. And I think starting with that notion of now that you can dive into your customer interactions and start to discern and glean this new level of information and insights is really kind of what's going to drive a lot of the other use cases that we talk about around generative AI in the contact center. So, if I were to kind of summarize that and boil it down, it really comes down to identify why they're calling and the root cause of that. And then you can split it out into, okay, well, this is a great call to eliminate or prevent or to send to an automated AI, IVA, or assistant. But it does start, I think, at that diagnostic level with the intent modeling and then the call driver modeling.
Yeah. I think there's lots of really great stuff there. And it is true that it's hard to think of really a contact center improvement strategy that doesn't start with figuring out why your customers are calling it, as you said there, Chris. And you just think back a couple of years ago to how contact centers would do that. It was kind of manual ticket tagging after a contact, where agents were rushed. They just picked the first one on the list, or maybe they had a personal favorite disposition code that they'd like to pick. And now through a platform like Zoom, you can automate that process and get a much clearer view of why customers are calling. So you can begin to orchestrate and compose experiences that blend AI channels and live agents, potentially proactive experiences too. So it's a really great use case to start with. And our next one, I think, is where most eyes are fixed right now within the customer experience space, and that is generative AI-powered virtual agents. Chris, I don't know if you maybe want to start by talking a little bit about this one.
Yeah, so happy to dive into that. The whole notion of generative AI, virtual agents, and self-service, right, has come a long way since the advent of ChatGPT. And that is probably, I think, the area that is in the market today probably highest risk for a company to deploy, because it touches your customer experience. The rest of these use cases we're talking about for AI in the call center or contact center customer experience don't actually interact with the customer. Your agents are still interacting, right? So for a lot of brands or a lot of companies, I think taking that leap into the unknown is probably the scariest part. But there's immense opportunity if you can do that well, if you can execute well. So if you can take that intent modeling data, the call driver data, all of that context, and create this knowledge base for not just your agents anymore, but this whole notion of an IVA or an assistant is powerful, because that can drive the better experience for you under certain circumstances. And the way we evaluate, well, how do you determine what's going to be a good fit to send to a Gen AI assistant versus what's not? There's a couple of sort of constraints in the environment. One, they're great for FAQs, right? But because you don't need access to the bot doesn't need access to anything outside of a knowledge base that's pretty standard these days. The other constraint then becomes you'll have to have the ability for that IVA to interact with back office systems, so your CRM. So somebody's calling to check an order status, they got to be able to get at the order status itself. And then the third is we chart all of your customer interactions in the quadrants that, if you can imagine the upper right quadrant as being high value, high complexity. And then in the bottom left quadrant is low complexity, low value, and then things are sort of strated out from there. We always recommend starting with those low complexity, low value interactions, and maybe they're high value but low complexity, because that's where today's even state-of-the-art IVAs are going to be able to thrive best with the lowest risk. As you start moving up that complexity scale, where maybe you've got a healthcare call or insurance where there's a lot of different stuff that agent needs to know to be able to interact with that customer, those then become opportunities for what's one of the other use cases we're talking about, which is agent assist, which to me is a very close sibling to IVAs. It's just that one is interacting with customer and the other one's interacting with agents. But I think it all comes down to really getting clear on what these new tools are going to be most effective at, and deploying there and starting with pilots and scaling out from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that quadrant example actually, on how to sort of quantify the best cases for virtual agents. That's really great. And I don't know if there's anything you would add to that, Chandler.
Yeah, I think, Chris talking about mapping out the intents, that is absolutely critical before you just wholesale launch a virtual agent. And what we found with Zoom customers, and Chris probably too with his customers, is there's maybe 4 or 5 intents that account for 80% of the interactions, 90% of interactions that happen in that contact center. And usually a couple of those, 1, 2, maybe 3 of those intents could be solved by a virtual agent, right? We know a Harvard Business Review a few years ago did a study, and they found that 81% of customers will try to self-serve first. And so we know there's this appetite for, look, I want to solve my own problem. I just can't find the right information, right? And so when we deploy Zoom Virtual Agent with our customers, what's absolutely mission critical for that is a review of their knowledge base. That is the number one indicator if Zoom Virtual Agent is going to be successful or not. Is how good is their data? How good is their information that is getting fed into Virtual Agent? So, yeah, I think definitely there's some risk there. We've seen some high profile hallucinations right in the news, but absolutely there are. I think for almost any contact center, Chris brought up healthcare. Right, you think about the different ways that you might interact with your healthcare company. If it comes to insurance, right, you're probably talking with an agent, right? The insurance process and trying to figure out what's covered, what's not. That's pretty tough to put into a knowledge base. But simple things like booking appointments and checking in on medication, right? Those things you can generally tie into an API. It's easy. Somebody wants to self-serve. They don't want to sit for half an hour to talk to an agent, but if it comes to insurance where there's potentially hundreds, thousands of dollars on the line, yeah, they probably need to talk to an agent. They're willing to sit on in a queue and wait till an agent's available. So, yeah, mapping those intents and seeing which ones can be offloaded to a virtual agent and ensuring you've got that knowledge base in place. We've seen tremendous impact for our customers.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned insurance actually, because I was speaking to an insurance CX leader quite recently, and they bucketed their interactions into transactional and consultative. And transactional, they just added automation everywhere they could. And on in the consultative, they looked for additional opportunities to build in conversation. So it's interesting to see the sort of these different perspectives on how you can approach conversation automation. And what I will say too is there's much more to the generative AI capabilities than sort of the basic conversational flow. For example, if I take Zoom's chatbot, for instance, there's a feature there that realizes when the customer changes their intent and then brings them back to make sure brings them back to where they were to make sure that the customer stays focused, and that improves the containment rates. So I think there's also GenAI features for testing bots as well that are very interesting. So it's a great use case. But as Chris did mention, it does align very closely with our next use case of real-time agent assistance. Chandler, I don't know if you want to maybe start with this one.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. I think agent assistance is one of those capabilities, use cases for AI that we're seeing the most traction and some of the highest impact. You think about things like, we launched auto translation in, I think, July. We didn't even make that big of a deal about it. But you think about, 20 years ago, you would have to staff your contact center with 20 different languages, people who spoke 20 different languages, to match what we've deployed now with this AI, where through a chat conversation, a customer can speak in up to 20 different languages, and the agent can understand in up to 20 different languages because AI is translating between them. What a great customer experience, right? Customers are no longer forced, if English isn't their first language, preferred language, and they prefer to speak in Spanish or German or French or something else, they're able to do that. And the agent can speak in their preferred language, right? Rather than forcing them into English or whatever it is. That is fascinating, right? And you think about the decades of contact centers, that just wasn't possible. And that's just a blip on kind of our whole roadmap, right? Which is, I just find fascinating. But the other areas we're finding agent assistants making a tremendous impact is with after call work. The ability to cut down all of that work that agents have to, and Chris has a great story on this, but all that work that agents have to do to pull down a transcription or to write notes, to add it to a CRM. There's a lot of contact centers that have to do multiple other steps that now can be handled by AI. You build a system, and it can get cut down by 80-90%. That is having a tremendous impact on agent experience. Agents, they don't want to be doing all this admin work. They want to interact with customers and provide that meaningful contact. And it's having a great impact on customers because those agents are spending less time on admin work and more time speaking with customers. So, the customers are not having to wait in queue as long. And so in terms of low risk AI applications, high impact, agent assistance, our customers are raving about it. And not to mention, during the interaction, right? Pulling in information from a knowledge base, the agents aren't having to go sift through a big long manual and an FAQ. They're getting it served up right on that same screen where they're serving their customers, and all their customer information is there. It's just a night and day difference between 10, 20, 30 years ago of what an agent had to do during an interaction just to answer a customer's question.
Yeah, absolutely. It really, you have really kind of shown how Agent Assist has gone cradle to grave there, almost from you start with automating a lot of the authentication process, but also that post-call summarization too. But I don't know, Chris, if you would add anything to what Chandler has said.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we have, as Chandler said, we have deployed, Agent Assist, Zoom's Expert Assist, I guess, into our contact center. We see, other companies doing the same. I think where I would start is that the notion of Agent Assist isn't like a one size fits all, and it's kind of a squishy term, frankly, because every vendor thinks of it differently, and every contact center thinks of it differently. Is it like the chatbot sitting on the agent desktop that helps them answer questions? Is it measuring the sentiment? Is it forcing an agent into a script? Is it after call summaries? And I get as sensitive about deploying anything that impacts our agent experience as I do a customer experience, because that agent experience is what not only impacts quality and after call work, but it also impacts retention. If you start frustrating your agents, they're going to bail. And part of what, I think has Zoom in particular has done exceptionally well is manage the agent experience with that assistant and the ability to kind of turn on and off what you want that agent experience to be based off the agent population. So as an example, if you've got a group of new hire agents, you want that experience to be different than the folks that have been on the phones for 6, 12, 24 months. Because if you're constantly force feeding stuff at that agent, they're going to get frustrated, right? They don't want all that stuff. They want to get in and do their job. But that new hire that needs the crutch, or if you're, again, in a higher complexity customer interaction where you've got a lot of moving parts and that agent doesn't want to memorize a 200-page technical manual to answer a customer question, that agent assistant is magic, right? On the, the post-call side of that, right, I think a lot of people are focused on reduce after-call work because of the financial gain. right? Which is an easy ROI metric, right? We can all do the math on that, and your CFO will be happy. But the biggest surprise we had when we rolled it out was the increase in accuracy in those post-call notations, where before an agent would have to manually take notes on a sheet of paper or on their notepad, which is a HIPAA nightmare, or a PCI nightmare, whatever. And you'd end up with inaccurate notations or incomplete. What that then causes is a whole lot of coaching, a whole lot of QA, a whole lot of stuff downstream, right? But when that AI pops up the call summary with exactly what that agent needs, and maybe they edit it a little bit, and then they move that into the back office application. Call work goes down, agent happiness goes up, and your accuracy goes up, which then eliminates downstream bottlenecks as well. And so, as a contact center outsourcer, our clients are happier, but because we're able to provide better service all the way around. And so, when I look again to kind of summarize, when you look through the lens of what is an agent assist, to start very clear, like, what are we trying to accomplish? What's that agent experience going to be like? Is the thing going to hallucinate like what it does on the customer side? How do you bring that down? And then if you're evaluating the products, really look at the capability set and then how you're going to bring that together. And again, you guys know I'm a huge Zoom fan, but I think they've done that exceptionally well in a way that doesn't overwhelm the agent, but becomes a tool for the agent. So start with the agent experience and walk backwards.
Yeah, lots of really great stuff in there, Chris. And I will refocus on summarization too, because I thought that was a really interesting point. And what I've noticed too is how that summarization is not only at the end of calls, but it's also during handovers. So that when a call transfers to a different agent, they have a summary that allows them to start the conversation from where it left off. They don't have to read through a long transcript or something like that. And that's huge for omnichannel.
It is huge.
As well. Yeah.
And one more dimension to that too, which was a surprise to me. I'm a bit of a contrarian, believe it or not, when it comes to rolling this stuff out, but is the supervisor view, where it's trending the sentiment in real time and the ability to view a transcript or a summary in real time. I was originally against that because I'm like, I don't want my supervisor staring at screens all day. Right. Until one day I was staring at the screen. I'm like, well, what's wrong with this call? And I hit the, view this transcript and then hit the auto summary, and I could tell exactly what was going on in the call and where the agent needed help. So at that point, the supervisor then can ping the agent, and to offer that real-time support. So I think we're discovering we're discovering the impact of this stuff that, you've got to stay open to surprises and the use cases, and really, I think, lean on your team, the frontline people, team to really kind of inform, where this stuff goes and how it gets adopted.
Yeah, that's a really great example, and it makes me think maybe I should have put supervisor assist on this list as well. But we'll go on to our next one now, which is automated quality assurance. Chris, I don't know if you maybe want to start here.
Yeah, this is another area that I can be opinionated on, because when I look at auto QA, in full disclosure, we do automated QA and we use, Zoom CX's QA product. But, again, kind of stepping back and looking at all of these use cases through the lens of what we're really doing is generating insights into customer interactions, whether that be customer-facing insights like why are they calling, or agent level insights into how are they doing, right? And so now that we have the capabilities with these platforms to generate really any level of insights or analytics or views, perspectives that you want, how are you going to execute on it? What is the value? And to me, when I look at something like auto QA, I think it's wonderful that you can move from evaluating 2% of your calls into 100% of calls. But to me, there's no value in having 500. If an agent takes 500 calls a month, having 500 automated QA forms, because coming back to that supervisor experience, well, what are they going to do with that? Right? Okay, so I know somebody's at 85% for empathy. That tells me nothing. What's key, operationally and execution speaking, is like identifying those coaching moments out of that. So if somebody didn't verify protected health information correctly, we're not going to go retrain that whole module. I want to know under what circumstances is that happening, or somebody loses call control, which is kind of a standard QA form thing, right? I want to know under what circumstances that happens so that we can then, the supervisor isn't focused on doing all the QA monitoring. We're able to surface that into, well, let's go coach them on this. Identify those interventions and moments that are going to improve the overall quality. Because I'm also kind of famous for saying that we don't follow KPIs in the traditional sense in our call center because they're all just averages and percentages, which can be game. So from a QA standpoint, I think it's great in concept. And what you really need to focus on, though, is don't generate data just to generate data. Generate the insights that are actionable out of that. And that can fall under QA. And I'll also say that QA as a function in the call center is about to undergo a massive transformation. As we rolled out auto QA, we took our QA analysts, we started making them performance coaches or more performance analysts, right? Because their time is freed up. And so we want them interpreting the data and not generating the data. And people are talking about eliminating the QA and, covering compliance. What again is with anything, step back and say, what are you really trying to accomplish with this? Are you trying to eliminate your QA department and say you have 100% quality monitoring? That's uninteresting to me. What is it that's actually going to move the needle for your business and your operations? And then auto QA is a tool to get there.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point in terms of the strategy sort of has to be in place, and then you can layer over the auto QA to really maximize the efficiency within that strategy. So you have analysts kind of using the tool to really spot insights, feeding that into your coaching team, but then also analysts leveraging the tool to make sure that coaching has had an impact, so you can measure your coaches too. I think those sort of workflows really have to be there. So lots of really great stuff there. I don't know, Chandler, if there's anything you would add to that at all.
Yeah, I think Chris brings up a great point of we're seeing a shift in work. We're not seeing an elimination of work, but a shift in work. And we've got competitors that paint this picture of a AI apocalypse where customer service teams are going to be they're all going to be fired and virtual agents are going to run the show. We don't see that. We see a lot of work shifting. We're seeing agents doing different kinds of work, more meaningful work, and same with supervisors. And auto QA, I think, talk about disruptive innovation. QM has largely not changed in 30, 40 years, right? The big innovation in QM was moving from paper scorecards to digital scorecards over the last 40 years, right? Now we're seeing the ability to not just score one or two interactions or evaluate one or two interactions per agent per month. You can evaluate every single one. And to Chris's point, that's going to create a lot of data, right? And big data, right? 10 years ago was the big buzzword. The problem was, well, what are you going to do with that data? Nobody had a plan for what are we going to do with this data or extract insights from this data once we have it, right? All these huge initiatives to store it, to gather and then store it, turned into nothing, right? Until AI came around to be able to process and digest and highlight insights from all that data. So, absolutely, Chris is, spot on with, QM manager. I talked with a customer last week on a webinar who's the only QM manager for her business, and she's now able to evaluate. I think right now it's 30% more than she has in the past in terms of calls, but she's shifting much more of her work to analyzing those interactions. And we've got Auto QA and Ask QM, or Auto QM and Ask QM, which we announced at Zoomtopia. That's going to give organizations the ability to score every single interaction. And then those QM managers can leverage our conversational interface to ask questions about any interaction. So, you can flag, well, here are my top 10 in terms of sentiment. Here are my bottom 10, right? Which is our customer that I spoke with last week. That's her focus is give me the top 10% and the bottom 10%. I'm going to analyze those so I can coach my agents on those. She likes to highlight the top 10 on group calls. And if, the bottom 10 individual calls, right? She doesn't want to call anybody out. But Auto QM is able to highlight those top 10, bottom 10, and then she can go in and just extract insights. And Ask QM is like I said, a conversational interface where you could say, hey, what did the agent do wrong here? What did they say that upset the customer? What was the customer upset about? Why was the customer not happy? So instead of somebody having to read that whole transcript or listen to the recording, they can ask questions in seconds and get answers back. That right? I mean, that's fascinating. That we're at this place now where we're not having to sit and listen to 3-4 minute calls at a time and only get to a handful of every day. So.
Yeah, and that conversational interface, as you mentioned, is huge, and it being able to spot the biggest sort of learning and recognition opportunities too, because as you're right in saying, a lot of contact centers still follow sort of a 20-30-year-old playbook for doing QA, where they pick random calls at random, maybe 5 or 6 a month, but also just choosing those with the shortest handling time because they have KPIs to hit, to where the lessons aren't really as ripe. So yeah, lots of really good stuff there, but I'm conscious of the time, so I'm going to quickly move us on to our final disruptive use case, and that is feedback analysis. I don't know, Chandler, if you want to go first on this one.
Yeah, just 2 quick points here. So similar to auto QM, that is taking away the need to have to listen to every single interaction. I think the next big innovation in AI is going to be, how do we eliminate surveys? Right? Nobody likes surveys. Survey participation rates have always been low. You get either the people who hate you or they love you, right? And you miss all this information in the middle. How can AI help replace that survey experience and predict what that customer felt and the level of satisfaction they had during that interaction without them having to actively give you a survey or fill out a survey? I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the next couple of years. In addition, one of our big missions on the Zoom contact center side is, how do we bring contact centers back into the fold, right? For so long, contact centers have been seen as these siloed organizations, right? Physically, they're usually in a different part of the country, maybe a different country altogether. They've got a different tech stack. We even call them different, right? We call them agents instead of employees, right? With Zoom and our platform, we're trying to bring that contact center back into the fold, and especially from a data standpoint. How can we provide access to data and insights that live in the contact center to other areas of the business, marketing, sales, that would love to understand why customers are calling in, what problems they're having, how are they reacting to this new marketing campaign I just launched? All that information for many organizations just sits in the contact center, and there's no way to access that. I think that's going to be, again, one of those trends these next couple of years of, how do we extract that data and inform other areas of the business? And with a platform like Zoom, where all that information is together, it's one connected platform, makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge differentiator, as you say, of Zoom. Actually, the fact that you can just extract an insight and send it across the business. But again, lots of really good stuff there. I don't know, Chris, if there's anything you would add to that.
I'll briefly say, I think there's a lot of richness in what Chandler said there, where the contact center has always been this notionally the holy grail of information and insights for outside departments, marketing, sales, and the whole gamut. And it, what's new now, for like feedback analysis and sort of trying to eliminate surveys is like, what was the point of a survey to begin with? To figure out what you're doing well, what you're not doing well, and what's the customer sentiment. Well, now that we can get at like sentiment analysis at a topic level, like, or use the AI models to discern the insights coming out of not just a singular interaction, but the history with that customer, right? That's powerful, because before, the survey was just a standalone silo of net new data, right? It's like, okay, they're mad about something, what? But now you've got everything that you can feed into that model. So, like, they've called about this order 5 times, or about this claim or whatever 16 times. You can probably discern what that survey result would be. And so I think that it is coming back again to the notion of, what insights do you want to generate out of your contact center? And you can categorize them like we did today, but there's a whole new spectrum and ocean of opportunity to discern out of that. And then as you're looking at rolling this out, look at the combinatory effect, right? I mean, a platform like Zoom, which enables companies like us to deploy these different use cases without buying and cobbling together a bunch of different solutions, I think it's pretty critical to success, because again, you are integrating your customer data, you're integrating all the insights, and now that makes it far easier for your your data team, if you have one, to go merge it with everything else and get clear pictures. Or if you're a mid-sized contact center, I mean, you're getting a whole new level of insights that you never thought possible before.
Yeah, and there's a lot that I want to add to that, because I think, again, lots of really good points, but I am conscious of the time, as I said. So what I'll do is I'll direct everybody to the Zoom website. I'll leave a link to the Zoom Contact Center below, so you can check out all of the use cases that we've discussed and many others there. But as I mentioned, I think this is probably the best place to end today's chat. But I do very much want to thank Chris and Chandler for joining me today. It's a great discussion. Thank you, and also thanks to everybody for watching. Bye for now.